What is slow poison?
As I said at the previous World Cup, we're going to kill them by 1,000 cuts. And I mean, it's that concept where you just hit at them, fire a shot, keep firing shots, and teams will eventually give up.
Because of how we train, obviously, our mauling, our scrums, your legs afterwards are like the rubber. Well, what we tend to do is that we actually focus on getting lead into the legs, make them stop the mauls, make them like hold them in the scrums longer. It's just fatigue. You're just building that constant pressure.
I mean, we always know the first 40, 50 minutes for a test match is going to be extremely hard. The pace is going to be high, but then having a couple of mauls, they might not work out every time, might not win a scrum penalty every time, but eventually the poison is going to take their legs away.
That's where you get the bomb squad now coming in, and then you're doing what they do best. So yeah, that's slow poison.
It is fairly safe to say that South African rugby is in a very healthy space right now. Another World Cup, plus the 2024 Rugby Championship, has left South African rugby looking as glorious as a Cape Town sunset. Led by their inspirational captain Physicality, they have become the first team to achieve 4 World Cups, and with Rassie at the helm, look to only improve this more and more. At the time of recording, they've continued this trend, winning the 2024 Rugby Championship in magnificent style, but regardless of all the added bells and whistles, never forgetting their main principles. Their principles of slow poison in the set piece, that ability to have 2 world-class packs who can come on and absolutely dominate. We have seen how it's gotten them out of trouble before, and how it has continued to allow them to dominate teams in 2024, sending multiple teams back because of this strength in depth. This is one of the biggest reasons behind their 2024 championship win. But, and I'm sorry to say it, this philosophy, whilst it is important, has been used in other sports. Bill James, the man behind Moneyball, established a set of principles which could effectively win baseball games, which was studied and followed religiously by Billy Beane's Oakland A's. Adhering to these principles led to their 20-game winning streak. However, one of their key philosophies in line with on-base percentage were walks. Now, we're rugby people, we're not baseball people, so it's pretty fair that we may not know what walks are. So we're going to break them down a little bit here so you get the principle behind it. Walks are essentially what a hitter gets when he lets 4 balls go by without swinging, or a throw from the pitcher which doesn't go over the plate. The reason balls are so good for the hitting team is 1, it guarantees the hitter getting on base if he gets a walk, and 2, it turns baseball into a battle of attrition. If you make them pitch over and over and over, they're going to tire. Relief pitchers or the bench aren't as good as starting pitchers, and therefore the more pitches you make them throw via walks, the faster they tire, the sooner they get their relief pitchers on. In baseball, it's all about exhausting arms, but in the rugby world, for the Springboks, it's all about exhausting legs. Keeping the ball in the mauls and scrums a little longer, building that poison, so that when the bomb squad come on, they either dominate exhausted guys or a fit but weaker scrum. Now, whilst Tony Brown's arrival has seen a mindset change in the Springboks, it will never override Rassie's main quality of this team, its physicality. The Springboks' physicality is their DNA. It is their DNA and Rassie knows it. It has allowed them to win 2 World Cups and dominate in terms of the set piece. Going forward, the Springboks are targeting a three-peat. They've won 2019, they won 2023, and now they want to go forward and win 2027 in Australia. Rassie is planning and building them towards this. Now, from recent performances in 2024, it's clear that they're on the right track. However, there are a few things that Rassie will be thinking about that means that they may not be able to operate the way they used to. And this is because of the age profiles of the squad. These are the key forwards that we have in the Springbok squad. Now, if we look at their age profiles, we can understand that by 2027, not all of them may be making it. What this looks like is unknown, as we're not entirely sure whether the guys coming through can dominate to this degree. Maybe they can, but if they are more level with the rest of the world, they need to be able to win in other ways. There are many ways to win, and one area which is expanding its remits of possibilities is the attack, with Ireland a front runner in this. Andy Farrell, being an ex-defence coach, is very aware of how modern D works, with this demo being a snippet from Phil Larder's The Iron Curtain defence. Here, we can see players are expected to defend zonally in threes, a concept taken from league now seen in many defence systems. The use of these mini-units was exploited by Ireland's restart return attack, With Farrell knowing this philosophy is used by the Springboks, he targeted its use. Doris runs the ball back and Ireland set up the two-phase move. Murray passes to Porter, who runs straight at the free unit, with Quagga defending McCarthy, Khaleesi Porter, and the sensational Creel accounting for Furlong's tip-on and the pullback option in Frawley. Now Ireland's objective is to remove the more mobile forwards in Smith and Khaleesi from the mini-unit on the next phase, so Porter runs straight at them, with McCarthy following with Furlong and taking them out of the game. This means on the next phase Malherbe is the catch-up defender, Mbonambi the tackler, and Creel the adjusting defender. Ireland have designed this to make sure that Malherbe and Mbonambi are here on the second phase, as they're the strongest but least mobile forwards whom Ireland want to target. Using Drifter, they want to target the space in between them, and as we see, by playing flat, they send Osborne straight through this hole, who with great support play takes the ball right to the line via Murray and scores the try. Now if we look again from the end-on angle, this really becomes clear. We have the catch-up in Malherbe and tackler in Mbonambi both targeting Sheehan and Frawley respectively. Now, both Frawley and Sheehan go right to the line, with Frawley targeting Mbonambi's outside shoulder and Sheehan targeting Malherbe's inside shoulder. This parts them like the Red Sea, opening the space for the penetrator in Osborne. Osborne's speed and flatness of the take means he gets through, with Creel nearly stopping him, but sublime support play seeing Ireland over. This move is called Drifter, an old school move from the England 03 playbook used and introduced to Ireland by Mike Catt. I actually argued for this move to make a comeback in an article a few years ago, as it presents defensive systems a different challenge to the ones that they're currently facing. The point is that in their quest to conquer line speed, Irish attack coaches went back to an old 2000s move to unlock the best defence in the world and succeeded. Whilst attack coaches are coming up with plays like this, they're also using things like turnover attack, building a turnover into an attacking ploy to regain the ball and therefore attack against unstructured defence. This has only just begun. There is going to be a lot more developments in this, which is why South Africa have gone for Tony Brown. They want to utilise his outside-the-box thinking and his brilliant innovative strategies that he employed with Japan to absolutely rip apart teams that should be beating Japan like Ireland and Scotland. The Tony Brown attack is so innovative and deceptive that it has been taken over by multiple teams in terms of their attacking shapes. But beyond the shapes, even some of the plays that Tony Brown developed even in his time during the NPC were absolutely crazy, beautiful and awesome, but really crazy. Brown isn't beyond using old ideas if it gets a result. Stuff like the old chip over the shoulder to actually score tries that was used in the early 2000s. If we have a look in later 2016, the same principle was used for the Highlanders to make a great initial break. We also have shielding, a concept developed by the Brumbies of the 90s where the player would turn his back to the defence so that they couldn't see the pass selection. Another move popularised by Joe Schmidt's Ireland, creating some great breaks and tries and found all over Tony Brown's Otago team. This trip down memory lane is something that I really do enjoy, and I'm not going to lie, there's a small part of me that would love to see this type of play coming back. You know, the late 90s, early 2000s, back Brumby style passes and just beautiful running lines. This is the stuff that I'd love to see, but ain't happening. Tony Brown is a great coach and loves developing new shapes and ways, which is why with South Africa his job is to add and not subtract. Rassie saw the dangers of going away from the box DNA under Alistair Coetzee's reign. Coetzee was under a lot of pressure from SA Rugby to develop the box attack and a more free-flowing style similar to what the All Blacks were doing at the time. But in doing this, they went away from the Springbok DNA way too much. This resulted in record losses and losses to teams that they shouldn't have been losing to at the time. As such, whilst Rassie has hired Tony Brown to develop this attack that Alistair Coetzee couldn't, he wants to make sure that South Africa do not lose their main point of difference, which is their exceptional physicality. Here go, add, not subtract. So, with Tony Brown coming in, he gets to work with a lot of exciting players. Players like Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu, who whilst exciting, seems tailor-made for Test rugby. This includes players like Pieter-Steph du Toit and Siya Kolisi, both well known for their defence but now ripping it up in terms of attack. And of course, he also has access to the South African wings, who whilst immense in defence, must have Brown salivating with what he can do with them in attack. Why is this so exciting? It's exciting because South Africa have been able to win the last two World Cups based off their defence and their set piece. However, whilst this style of play is critical and proven to win tight, pressured test matches, especially the kind found in World Cup competitions, Tony Brown, the man behind Japan, has the opportunity to work with players who can provide so much more than that. be it new players that have recently made the Springboks or players that have been present in the squad since Rassie came along in 2018. If Brown can introduce some of the dynamics that he brought through to Japan, he can make them a complete team. And if he can, I think we're talking about a Springbok team that can rival the All Blacks 2015 as the greatest team of all time. And this is the highest compliment I'm able to give. But how is he going to do it? Well, let's show you. This is a long one and it gets detailed. So grab a cup of tea, sit back and hopefully enjoy it. Now, Rassie has hired Tony Brown because he sees the game moving towards the attacking side, and he's hired him to add something to his prior philosophy, namely on attack. The prior philosophy in attack was heavily influenced by the exceptional Felix Jones and his analysis to help dictate South Africa's attacking plans. You see, South Africa's game plan pre-2024 was namely very territorially and defensively focused, with a huge focus placed on pressure and identifying key weaknesses in the opposition to gain set-piece opportunities. These set-piece platforms offer the opportunity for points via scrum and specialised plays, with transition attack also having an impact. What did this actually mean for the pre-2024 team? Why did Rassie and Jacques put so much emphasis on set-piece defence and kicking? Well, it comes down to the Pareto law. The Pareto law is a principle by which 80% of the outcomes come from 20% of the causes, as shown here, 80% of the smoke coming from one fire, or 20%. In rugby speak, this means invest in the practices which return the majority of your points, which is why the South African scrum is so good because it's designed to get points in these situations. However, in attack, the three main investments that Felix Jones really invested in were set-piece attack, a transition attack, and lastly, the multi-phase attack. Now, by principle of the ordering, we'll focus on the type of analysis that Felix Jones would do on the set-piece attack first, and why it's so important. To show this, let's flash back to the quarter-final in 2023 and the now famous purple move. Designed as a two-phase move, it puts the tallest men in the Springboks against an isolated Antoine Dupont. The first phase is designed to simply get the ball wide and isolate all the backs on the near side of the field. Thereby, when the crossfield kick or DA option goes up, it will result in Antoine Dupont having to outreach the tallest men in the Springbok pack. Now, the kick isn't the best, which is why there's some support here, but Diolande still manages to make a brilliant initial break, and a phase later, the try is scored. Now, it should be noted that I am actually very partial to this move. In 2021, I actually thought that this could actually be quite effective against the Springboks if you managed to run a three-phase strike move, avoiding the forwards and avoiding the centre split, thereby isolating Faf de Klerk at 9, similarly to the way that Dupont was isolated. However, it gets far more sophisticated than that. Later on in this game, the Springboks run a move which got them back into the game and ultimately won them the game. And as shown here, it was designed to create mismatches. Whilst known for Etzebeth's carry, this move was actually designed to provide wider options. As we can see here, Willie le Roux is actually pointing wide saying it's time to go, but the ball goes to Etzebeth and Etzebeth just does what Etzebeth does and, smashes over. The detail that goes into these moves is insane. However, another key focus is the Springboks' transition attack. Here, the Springboks force a turnover and run a basic shape on the short side to narrow the defence. After this, they get the ball to Lebok, who does a brilliant DA option to an incredibly flat Kurt Lee Arendse. There's only one winner. This was not just brutality, but intelligence and brilliant execution. Now, with Felix's detail and analysis, these two avenues of attack were absolute cash cows for the Boks and resulted in some magnificent scores, which obviously led to wins. However, Tony Brown's entry is related to developing the multi-phase attack, namely with principles employed during his time with Japan. Using his now widely spread 1-3-2-2 shape, his Japan were designed to be skillful, use width and be fluid in their attack. As we watch through this clip, which we will focus in more detail in a little bit, we see short passes, skillful forwards with dynamic carrying, lightning quick ball or LQB as it's known, and rapid identification of space. We see multiple options off a running 9 here, and different backs able to step into first receiver, with the 13 taking the ball flat and getting the ball wide with an M1, which eventually leads to the break and therefore the try. The thing that I really want to highlight and talk about here, however, is the two-sided attack and why it's so lethal. To employ maximum width and present challenges for defences, all Tony Brown offences have an element of a two-sided attack, meaning the attack can be fired from both sides of the ruck. This is something that is pretty much compulsory if you want a proficient test level attack now, as you need to be able to move the ball wide and go to either side of the ruck, which requires twin playmakers. Twin playmakers like Ford and Farrell, who ran the England attack at 10-12 for years during the Eddie Jones era, and players like Barrett and McKenzie, who run the attack at 10-15. Flashing back to 2019, we can see how the All Blacks 1-2-3-2 attack shape allowed an effective two-sided attack, with Mo'unga and Barrett each taking ownership of one side of the ruck for attack. This is essential for the modern day test attack, and under Tony Brown, Japan were no exception in how this was used. Brown employed an axis of Yu Tamura and Yoto Nakamura, or the 10-12 axis, in order to run his attack. Here, against Samoa, we see the two combining to release Matashima up the 13 channel, making a significant initial break and a huge gain. Now, a key principle under Brown is that other combinations like the 13 and 15 can link up. As seen here, without the 13-15 axis, this try probably isn't scored. Having a two-sided attack and players who can step into first receiver is especially prevalent with short-side attacks, but it requires great identification of space and good skill sets in order to employ it. Now, if we look at this from the very start, we can see how this attack panned out. Off a line-out, the first phase strike is designed to put the best carrier in Michael Leach up against Finn Russell to try and get gain line. Now on second phase, the ball goes wide to get outside the 13 channel, and this is where we start to pick up the phase attack. One forward resources the wide ruck, ensuring LQB, with a 3-pod forming off 9 and a 2-pod forming off 10. The 2-pod takes the ball off 10, trucking up the guts and forming a midfield ruck, from where if they want to, they can move open side. However they don't, they choose to go blindside. Now, what decides if we should rewind or go back blindside our attack? Well, to explain this means going back to that Phil Larder defence video and what all players here are proactively doing, aka the fold, or how they're organising themselves on the field. Now, every professional team in the world, be they club level or international, will have a fold policy, or a framework of how they'll organise themselves after a set piece or at a particular location on the field. Now, take France off the scrum. Murray passes off 9 to McCloskey on a hard line. Now the French back row, highlighted in red, fold around the ruck to protect against same-way attack. Simultaneously, the French type 5 in yellow look to fill in the opposite fringe, but are slow to fill, a weakness Ireland have seen and attempt to exploit with Murray's pick and go. The back row here are known as the fold forwards, while the type 5 are known as the fill forwards. Now, Murray's pick and go is only foiled by the illegal actions of Untamak here, who makes the most professional fouls, which really should be a yellow card and a penalty try. Now, whilst important, probably the most key is the fold policy off line-out, due to the lethality of the line-out strike. There are so many more questions for the defence to answer. Where was the attack's initial strike channel on first phase? Where are the 10, 12 or 15? Have any ball carriers arced around the ruck for a same-way attack, or are they setting in an 11 or 21 pattern? All these things have to be answered on the fly. This is why line-out fold policy is inherently more interesting and why I'm using it as an example to teach you. So here, the Boks have a 4-man line-out strike and the ball goes out to Pollard. Now, here is where we need to break down the general principles of line-out fold policy by strike zone. Now Pollard has multiple choices of carrier here, all of which will have a dedicated strike channel. These are red, approximately around the 10 channel, blue, approximately around the 13 channel where you're aiming for a centre split, and lastly, green, or the wide channel. Now the first phase strike channel determines how many forwards will fold around the ruck in the case of a clear same-way attack. If you hit up around red, you'll generally get 4 forwards folding around. If you hit up around blue, you'll generally get around 3 to 4 depending on what the attack is doing, and lastly, if you hit around green, you get 2. Now as this plays out, Khaleesi goes up the red or 10 channel, with Kane acting at 10 and DMAC in the backfield. As we can see, because the 10 channel's been hit, we see 3 forwards folding round followed by Lomax, making 4, who was determining if he was needed on the fill side. Now, this is the All Blacks, but the Springboks follow very similar principles, with Sia, Peter, Bongi, Vincent, Franz, and the 8, be it Visa or Quagga Smith, having a huge impact on the fold. Sia Khaleesi's positioning is very important off shortened lineouts, with the 6 being the first defender inside the 10 to assist in double hits and making a dominant tackle. This is because, of course, the 10's a good strike channel. Now against Wales we see something very similar, but with Quagga Smith at 6 instead. As we can see, 6 is lined up inside the 10 and he is there to defend the inside shoulder of the 10. Now Wales launch their strike up the blue channel or the centre split. This means we get either a 3 or a 4 fold, but considering the 10 is off feet and Wales are arcing, a 4 fold happens in anticipation for the same way attack, with the 4 forwards in red folding and the 2 forwards in yellow filling. Again, showing massive work rate, the 10 and 12 quickly reload into their positions to get back to the edges. Now, the 4 men in the fold usually constitute 2 back rows, the hooker and the tight head lock, whereas in the fill, it constitutes of the tight head prop and the back row. If the attack hits the 10 channel or the red or the midfield, this 2-4 dynamic is usually followed, with it happening here due to the 10 being taken out on the first phase strike. This 2-4 dynamic is the ideal fill fold principle for this type of first phase strike, which we go into in a little bit more detail later actually. Now, we see similar principles executed by Argentina against South Africa. Garcia hits Chocobares up the 10 channel where he is tackled by Lebok and Khaleesi. Immediately we see the 2-4 policy start to show, with Mbanabi and Notye folding, alongside with Khaleesi and Pieter-Steph du Toit. On the other side, we see Malherbe and Wiese fill in on the blind side. Now, a really interesting and important note is that if Khaleesi tackles or is brought in, Pieter-Steph du Toit is key. The reason being is that the blindside flanker, or the 7 in this case, on the same way attack will need to fill the role of the catch-up defender, folding round to become the last forward or the first man inside the free edge or the first centre. If it doesn't go same way, the tight head prop as one of the defensive captains is key here. Malherbe identifies the 10 making a late swing, meaning the 21 pattern is on. He starts pushing Ox out before the ball is even left, meaning the attack is well handled by the out-to-win blitz. Now we see Pieter-Steph du Toit's line and the 2-4 principle later again in the game. This time, Garcia passes to Albanos, who passes to Chocobares, who pop passes to Oviedo targeting the 10 channel, with the lateness of the pass meaning Diolande jams in. However, this results in Khaleesi, Steph du Toit, Mbanabi and Notye folding round again to form their 4-fold. Simultaneously on the far side, we see Malherbe and Wiese fill in again as per SOP. Now let's say the tackle is a little further out in between the 10-12 so Khaleesi doesn't get involved. Now in this case, the 7 doesn't need to fill in because Khaleesi hasn't been tackled, so therefore he folds around as part of that 4, operating as that catch-up defender on the inside of the first centre/back defender. Now in this case the All Blacks rewind. However, we have a back row in the 7 and one out from him, the tight head prop in Malherbe, ready to deal with this attack. Now, whilst there is a clear process and policy on how to operate this fold, it must be adaptable. On a 5+1 Ireland lineout, the ball gets to Murray, who in turn gets it to Lowe, who in turn passes it to Doris, who hits up the 10 channel. Now he hits and takes Pollard and Khaleesi, but both of them are absorbed and brought into the tackle. This means that 2 men, including one back row, are taken out of the defensive line, threatening the same way attack. However, Quagga Smith as the 8 joins the fold portion, making sure it retains its 4 men, whilst Malherbe fills in as 1 man. Malherbe didn't have his customary 2-man quick fill, but clearly it's more important to have 4 men in the fold. Now this is process driven, but there are clearly times where it isn't. In this example, the Wallabies launch off a 4-man lineout, getting the ball to Loloseo, who hits Valentini up the 10 channel, with Khaleesi and Feinberg Umungazulu going in for the hit. Now we look to have 2 men committed, meaning the 7, 8, 2 and 5 will fold and Malherbe will fill in on the blind side, creating a 1-4. Yet this doesn't transpire, with Steph du Toit cancelling his fold. Not only does Steph du Toit cancel his fold, but he calls round Lowe back from the fold portion to fill in on the near side. Now this certainly doesn't look process driven. So why? On the lead up to the fill portion, however, we can see Steph du Toit looking around at the short side, analysing and seeing if they're coming for an 11 pattern and actually pointing. This is why he cancels his fold and why he calls Lowe back over. This is the reason why Malherbe and Steph du Toit are so important, because they can override this process if necessary. Even the process where the strike zone location can affect the fold. Off a 5-man lineout, Perenara passes to Surveyor, who passes to Kane hitting up the 12-13 channel or the blue strike zone as we described it earlier. Now because it's a blue strike zone here, we have 3 forwards folding around and 3 forwards filling, rather than the 2-4 dynamic we've seen in all prior examples. This location creates the centre split, with Diolande and Creel splitting to their respective sides. Correct folding in particular is critical for 11 and 21 patterns off set piece. Now earlier we showed an 11 pattern with the Argentinians hitting up the 10 channel and therefore folding 4 forwards round with a 2 fill, Malherbe and Wiese. Now Wiese's positioning here turns out to be absolutely crucial. Whilst a same way setup, it's ideal as it covers the 11 pattern, and as such Wiese manages to catch up, tackling Rubiolo, who manages to get through the defence and make a huge gain, which would be a lot worse if Wiese wasn't here. Now the reason we've gone into this much detail is that fold inaccuracies are one key to using the 2-sided attack. The other being the movements and actions of the backfield pendulum, how many men there are and where they are on the field and where they're going. Now, getting back to Japan, because we have been away from them for quite a while, but the fold inaccuracies are the reason we saw the two-sided attack be so effective here. As we can see, they go out to the two-pod in the centre, and we can see here Johnny Gray shooting up to pressure Tamura, but loads back open side. This is the mistake, as both Brown and Gilchrist have folded, creating free folding players when the position on the field needs only 2. We can even see the 6 pointing and going, too many folded, get back over. However, the Scots are a little too slow. Nagari scoots to draw Jamie Ritchie, before passing to his free pod. Now here is where it dawns on Chris Harris. He is screaming at Gray, screaming at Brown to get over so he can drift out. But it's too late. The pass goes to Lafayette, who with an M1 links up with Tupou. Tupou in turn gets outside Chris Harris before offloading to Matashima, at which point it's the end and it's a try. Now in contrast to the two-sided attack, the same way attack depends heavily on the 10-12 and multiple playmakers, with a lot of onus being put on width and speed as well. Now as we can see here, we have a 1-3-2-2 attack shape set up. Here, Tamura is operating at first receiver and Nakamura is the pullback option behind the free pod, with a 2-pod further out ready to take the ball if they need to. However, the ball goes to the free pod, and I want to focus on something here. Inagaki is using footwork to get to the outside of Nell so we can commit Dell. This footwork or outside step plays a key part in narrowing the defence, as you'll see later, so you will want to remember this. Now, the ball is recycled, and the ball goes out to Tamura with his 2-pod outside him, and Nakamura as the 12, behind him as the pullback option. Now this pod are running great lines, but a little bit further out could allow them to take a harder unders line, which in turn would allow them to have a higher chance of committing Blade Thompson, highlighted in orange as the last forward defender. Isolating him would in turn help the outside channels, as the ball goes back to Nakamura, who in turn passes out to Matashima, who has the 2-pod outside him. By committing the defender and running an M1, he buys space for Leach, who makes huge ground on the right wing. This is the 1-3-2-2. It is their default attacking shape, but like Tony Brown and his Springboks, this does not mean that they are constrained to this shape. It is incredibly important to note that. The numbers in each pod can change dependent on ruck resourcing needs, gain line made, available personnel, strategy. The list is long and it's adaptable. However, space over shape is the key thing to notice when going forward in the Tony Brown system. Here we have a 1-3-2-2, with Tamura putting Ku through a hole, isolating Healy and Furlong, where he makes a significant initial break, and as we can see, Nakamura's got his hand up as if yellow, ready to take the ball and move it wide immediately. Now the ball goes out to Lemeki, who's caught pretty effectively. Now as we can see, they set up and they're getting ready to go back to the free pod, but as we can see, they're now running a 1-1-3-2-1. Their 10-12 playmaker axis is next to the pods, and as we can see here, Ku again goes on that outside run, trying to attract Van der Fleer. They move back short side as the open side isn't ready yet and they want to attract numbers into that area. Then once they've actually got there, they can use their 3-2-1 shape to move the ball wide using either 1, 2 or 3 phases, depending on which pods they actually use. Now whilst this is somewhat hasty, I want you to focus on the main ingredients, which are space first, shape second, using your two-sided attack and footwork to both stretch and narrow the D, and lastly, developing a skilled side with multiple players able to operate as first receiver. Now, we've talked about Tony Brown and his time with Japan, including the principles that he used and what he employed. However, we haven't talked about what he wants to bring over to South Africa and what Rassie wants him to do. This is what you've been waiting for. So finally, after all the Springbok defence videos, let's break down a Springboks attack. Now, as we know, Rassie has brought on Tony Brown in an effort to develop and evolve the Springboks to becoming a total, complete, all-court rugby team. Now this is all well and good, but one other thing Rassie wants is to make his team incredibly hard to analyse. Japan's attack is fairly hard to analyse due to the variety in it, but whilst he wants to take certain elements of it, we also must remember that Japan and South Africa are very different teams. Now there are certain things that you can copy. In 2019, Japan run a line-out play. Off the top, the ball is delivered to the 9, who shoots a long flat pass to the 10 who has a 2-pod outside to him to encourage drift from the 10 channel. He also has the scissors line from his 12, which he takes. Nakamura then takes the ball flat, passing back inside to his 14 in Matashima, targeting weak shoulders. 5 years later, South Africa run a line-out strike. the ball being delivered off the top to Reinach, who shoots a long flat pass to 10 with a 2-pod outside him to encourage drift from the 10 channel, and a scissors option in 12. He takes the scissors option, who takes the ball flat, passing back inside to the 14 in Colby, who makes 10 metres through a half gap and weak shoulders, very similar to the way Japan did it. Now, whilst they can copy certain moves, we have to remember that the players that South Africa have are completely different to the type of players that Japan have. South Africa have different types of athletes. Now you see, if we look at Japanese rugby, there are certain things it has. It has skill sets, mobility, footwork, passing, width, speed, LQB, offloading, and tip-ons. It has all these things because it needs these things. They have so many good things, but they do not have the South African power game. These qualities are why the 1-3-2-2 was developed, to help enable and enhance these qualities to make Japan the best, most attacking team that they could be. As such, we have a new shape on the market. Tony Brown was the man behind the 1-3-2-2, designed to enhance Japan's skill sets and bring them to the fore. But with South Africa, we now have the 1-4-2-1. Now you should hopefully know this by now, but just to re-clarify, this is Tony Brown's new attack shape. The attack shape which dictates how forwards are split around the field. Now, as we've seen quite a few times, we can see here the 1-3-2-2 attack shape of Japan, how it's set up, how it's designed to generate width and to provide multiple options with which the playmakers can decide. Now, make no mistake, South Africa want these perks, but unlike Japan, they're going about it in a completely different way with the 1-4-2-1 attack shape, with the forwards highlighted in red and orange as you can see here, and the playmakers in yellow. Now, this is a brand new attack shape, so you've got to be wondering, why? Why is Tony Brown picking a 1-4-2-1? Why would he not just take the 1-3-2-2? Well, again, it comes down to the athletes that both teams have in their wide channels. You see, when Japan go wide, they have the 2-pod, and they have the 2-pod there because they need to be able to retain ball. They need to be able to provide ruck security. Japan may need 2 players in order to do this. However, now that he's joined South Africa, he now has players like Siya Kolisi and Pieter-Steph du Toit, hardened, immense back rows who can make these clear-outs by themselves. Now here, the kick returns happened, they've moved wide, Creel's taking it up and Pieter-Steph du Toit is there to provide the 1 forward clear-out option. They then set with the 1-4-2-1, with the ball going to Oxenche, who passes behind to Willie, who has the 2-pod off him. Using missile carry, which, trust me, we explain later, he puts low into a hole, making considerable gain line and setting the next phase with which they can exploit with quick ball. As we can see, they move the ball wide with Siya Kolisi here providing that 1 option, operating as a catch and pass line and getting the ball into the 22. Here, they keep ball alive, trying to maintain momentum and keep going forward. Now, it does become a little bit of hot potato, but they maintain possession and they set the ruck. Now, we need to have a look at that again, as something happens here that's quite important. As the ball is moved wide and Kolisi integrates into a catch and pass line, he gets taken out, and whilst he manages to offload to Dialende and momentum is maintained, he's out, and as such Etzebeth has to step in to ensure ruck security if the Wallabies counter ruck, especially against a ruck full of backs. Now this means there are 2 forwards here, when the shape denotes it as a 1-4-2-1, which means that it's one man's responsibility for the wide channels, but because Kolisi was taken out, Etzebeth had to adapt. Now Kolisi as a wing forward is in the right place, but Etzebeth needs to be over here in the 4-pod. That he's not means that we now have a 2-3-2-1 rather than a 1-4-2-1. The ball goes out to the 3-pod who truck it up, and with albeit neutral gain line and a little bit sloppy, managed to present the ball to Reinach quickly. Reinach passes to Willie at first, who passes behind the 2-pod to Feinberg Umangazulu. Now this is where we explain missile carry and how important it is to the Springbok attack. This dynamic leads to a try, and it's all down to the actions of Feinberg Umangazulu and what he does here. This dynamic is missile carry. Feinberg Umangazulu's line here is designed to get him outside his opposite man and commit his outside defender. If he can commit his outside defender, similar to the footwork we saw earlier, Feinberg Umangazulu's speed allows him to commit this man, which in turn prevents him from drifting. Now if he drifts, he is able to actually get out and mark the missile carry, which is the running line by Pieter-Steph du Toit here, striking the 13 channel. As we watch this play out, we see that the outside defender's inability to drift out means the space opens up for Pieter-Steph du Toit. Creel's short line off 10 also adds to this, preventing Hunter Paisami from drifting and opening the 13 channel. Now, Pieter-Steph du Toit does bobble the ball a little bit here, but as he takes it, he goes straight through on a very fast and a very hard line, and therefore is near impossible to stop. Now, this is a new, but a very common principle of South Africa now. Against New Zealand, we see a similar process to what we had here, with a 1-3-2-2 operating. Now, le Roux starts his overs line, looking to commit Sevu Reece's inside shoulder. Simultaneously, Pieter-Steph du Toit starts his missile carry line, and even though the pass is forward, it buys him a couple of seconds, which gets him outside of Reece and on the front foot. Now, Eben Etzebeth picks and goes here, and therefore South Africa are at a point where they're ready to start their two-sided attack. 2 men are in the ruck, meaning they've settled into a 1-2-4-1, which is essentially a 1-4-2-1 but reversed. Now, the playmaking axis of le Roux and Pollard combine to get the ball out to the wide channels, where as we can see, we see de Allende doing his overs line, using that footwork to try and commit the inside shoulder of Rieko Ioane. This is all with a view to providing Jesse Kriel with weak shoulders with which he can go up the guts and hopefully make ground, with Siya Kolisi here ready to secure the ball if needed. Now, in the next phase, we see that the Springboks have settled into their 1-4-2-1, with an idea to strike the 13 channel outside Sam Cane as pointed by the arrow. This wide pattern has basically narrowed the defence, with the 4-pod going up the guts again with an extra pick and go to suck in even more defenders via Jasper Wiese. Now, they get on the front foot here and they're ready to move wide. Now, what happens here is interesting, as we'd expect the ball to go to Willie le Roux, but it doesn't. Pollard takes the ball and passes it to Etzebeth. Now, Etzebeth essentially runs the back's role in missile carry here. He sees the space in the 13 channel and runs straight at the inside shoulder of his outside defender in Sam Cane. This, in turn, opens the 13 channel for Willie le Roux now as the missile carry. This line by Willie is so good, it takes a miraculous last chance tap tackle by Sevu Reece to snuff out the threat. Now, as this passage of play plays out, we can see how it operates around the attack. Here, le Roux and Steph du Toit combine to launch missile carry outside Sevu Reece. On the next phase, they launch pick and go, forming a 1-2-4-1, after which the ball is moved wide, where again, they shape to run missile carry via the outside arc of Damien de Allende. The ball secured, they go into their 1-4-2-1 again, before going out to run missile carry with Etzebeth and Willie le Roux combining to strike the 13 channel. Now, this is clear pattern play, and this outside step or overs line is seen all throughout the Springboks attack, be it Pieter-Steph du Toit, centres like Damien de Allende, and usually with missile carry options to take advantage of this narrowed defence. Now, whilst we're mainly interested in South Africa's use of this, there are other teams that run it as well, not just South Africa, with recently New Zealand taking this line to actually attract 2 defenders, after which they get the ball out to Talea, who scores a try from this. It's a common tactic now, but there are even more nuances to it than we can say. Here, Damien de Allende is trying to get to the inside shoulder of Rieko Ioane. This in turn allows Jesse Kriel as the missile carry, which in turn will attract the out-to-in rush of Mark Talea. So if Damien de Allende commits Ioane, Kriel's line will make gain line, meaning Talea as the adjusting defender will have to bite in. This in turn opens the space out wide for the M1 from Damien de Allende. Now, we see this on multiple occasions via the Springboks 2024 performances. The Springboks regather a kick, after which they move the ball wide. Now, there's not much shape here, but what I want you to focus on is the actions of Willie le Roux here. Willie le Roux here targets right, with Kriel operating as the missile carry. The missile carry in turn draws in the winger, meaning when the winger bites in, the M1 option is on to Kurt Lille-Arendse to take the ball up this gap. This M1 option puts the Springboks on the front foot, allowing them to work their magic with their footwork. Against Ireland, we see similar results. Le Roux arcs out to target the inside shoulder of Craig Casey, opening the 13 channel for a Pieter-Steph du Toit missile carry, as we can see here. However, this in turn will attract the attention of Lowe, jamming in on him. As such, the M1 option to either Kolisi or to Colby is on. To make this pass under this pressure requires huge skill, hence the role is given to the 10 or 15. Now, it should be noted that South Africa do not just use this dynamic for their brilliant outside backs. Their outside backs are magnificent, of course, but as we've seen, we can see missile carry being performed by Siya Kolisi and Pieter-Steph du Toit here. Siya Kolisi puts his hand up here because he sees a huge opportunity. You see, South Africa have targeted Talea's turn in D before. Talea is a sensational winger and is especially dangerous around the ruck. However, in defence, he can get caught out. Here, Colby takes advantage of his turn in D, and later on in the England series we see Feyu Oboso taking advantage as well, with Talea slow to turn, meaning Feyu Oboso takes the ball and manages to get round the outside of him. This missile carry option is one of many perks that this shape offers, and is one of the things that Tony Brown has introduced. However, we do now need to move on and talk about the other perks, starting with the two-sided attack and how it works with the 1-4-2-1 in the South African system. Now, going back to the Australia series, off a kick return, the Springboks move the ball infield and strike up the guts. Now, as we can see, after this on second phase, they run round with two forwards, aiming to set up a new two-pod and therefore set their shape. This is achieved. As we can see, after the two-pod crash, we have a 1-2-4-1 setup, with two playmakers operating behind the four. Now, the peel forward Vincent Koch, highlighted in orange, which we describe later, separates from the four-pod, with LaRue using him as a post to pass to Pollard. Now, the Springboks want to get back into shape again, which is why they use the short side, with Grant Williams scooting to try and get into position. Now, after this point, they then form another two-pod, with the hit up going up the midfield. This again forms the 1-2-4-1, however with Pollard and LaRue on one side and Feinberg and Mngazulu on the other. This in turn creates that two-sided attack. They choose Willie LaRue's side, again with the peel forward and Vincent Koch splitting from the four-pod. This means LaRue has Vincent Koch outside him, encouraging drift and therefore trying to exploit this with an inside option. Now at this point the attack isn't really going anywhere, so they pass back to Cheslin Kolbe, who attempts the drop goal, looking to come away with points. Now alongside the outside footwork and the overs lines, the two-sided attack is intended to narrow the defence. Off kick return, Wiese takes the ball to midfield and the Springboks move it wide. From here, Khaleesi goes in as a sole forward cleaner, forming the 1-4-2-1. We see Nortje use footwork here to try to get to his outside man with Ox off him as the peel forward. Mbonambi disconnects from the four-pod due to not being needed and reloads around, offering a short option for Hendrikse by combining with the two-pod. This in turn attracts attention, allowing Wiese a gainline carry, and quick ball is generated. Due to the lengthened ruck, Hendrikse takes his pick and go and makes a couple more metres, after which they've then got gainline and it's time to move wide. Now, Lebok passes to Pieter-Steph du Toit, who using footwork tries to commit his outside man in order to launch Kurt Lee Arensat as missile carry. The Pumas defend this very well by wrapping up his arms, however as always with Pieter-Steph du Toit, he makes a few metres for his troubles. Now, the Boks have set into their 1-4-2-1 attack shape. However, as we can see, the 10 and 15 are currently in the wrong place. From a wide position using the 1-4-2-1, the 10 usually positions behind the 4-pod while the 15 positions behind the 2-pod. Because these guys aren't in position, it's going to be pretty hard to go wide. As such, they hit up the 4-pod. They do this via missile carry again, which shows its versatility. Wiese takes the ball at first receiver and immediately starts arcing out, attempting to commit the inside shoulder of his outside defender. Once achieved, he passes to the missile carry option in Etzebeth, who presented with weak shoulders makes considerable gain line as Eben Etzebeth usually does. Now the Springboks rewind their attack, passing to Creel, who gets the ball to Pieter-Steph du Toit. Now because it's Pieter-Steph du Toit, all the Pumas in the area scramble in to take him down because he is that type of carrier who can attract attention. Pieter-Steph du Toit's carry here narrows the defence, as a bunch of Pumas have come in to cover him, and in a bid to stay connected, that means the rest of the line has to come in as well. Now Malherbe's entry to secure the ball has created a 2-4-1-1, but with the 10 and 15 now in the right positions in order to move wide. The ball goes out to Etzebeth, who has switched positions with Wiese as the peel forward. He pulls back to Lebok, starting his overs line to launch missile carry and dummying to bait Matera forward, which opens the 13 channel for Fassi's missile option. Fassi goes straight through the 13 channel, linking up with Cheslin Kolbe. And you know Cheslin Kolbe in situations like this, he's not being stopped from the try line. This whole try is a testament to the space over shape philosophy, with the merging of the playmaker and penetrator roles key. In this 2-4-1-1 shape, the 15 starts as a playmaker intended to take the pass behind Ox and move it wide, but Lebok's arc and dummy create space in the 13 channel for the missile carry that Fassi is best placed to strike, changing his role from playmaker to penetrator. This is a testament to the adaptability that Tony Brown wants in his Springboks attack. Against New Zealand, Willie LaRue here is lined up as a playmaker, as seen calling the ball, but Etzebeth's interjection changes LaRue's role, going from playmaker to penetrator via the missile option up the exploitable 13 channel, which is aided and delivered by Etzebeth. This switching of dynamics on the fly is an obvious perk when you consider the players that South Africa have at their disposal. Fassi, for example, he's probably the future, and he's an exceptional distributor as well as a penetrator, which is why South Africa have incorporated this into their game plan. Now, moving on from the two-sided attack, we have to start talking about the Boks' intention to play total rugby with their shape changes, breaking structure, and their nuances. Now, as described earlier, even with Japan, Tony Brown teams were very comfortable adapting and changing their shape to suit the needs of the situation in front of them. This meant they could run a 1-3-2-2, a 2-3-2-1, really it depended on the situation in front of them. However, this is exactly the same for South Africa, whereas they have a 1-4-2-1 but they can run a 1-3-2-2, 2-4-2, 2-4-1-1, 2-3-2-1, 1-4-1-2. It can change regularly, but of special focus is the 2-4-1-1. Let's take you to a wide channel strike against Aussie, with Dixon taking the ball up and supported by Khaleesi forming the 2-pod on the far wing. This in turn sets the 2-4-1-1 attack shape. Now, Oxenche is calling for the ball here because he's seen space and wants to run missile carry with Umbanambi. However, this is overridden by the calling of the 10 behind him. Feinberg Umangazulu calls for it, hence Pieter-Steph du Toit pulls back to him, and now we have this situation. Feinberg Umangazulu has two options. One, he can run the missile carry, with low on the hard line, or he can pass behind to the slice option in Willie le Roux. Willie le Roux in turn has his missile carry option in Etzebeth, or his slice option out the back in Damien Dialende, which is the wide option. As you can imagine, the number of options this presents makes it very challenging for a defence to know where the ball is going to go. Both playmakers in 10 and 15 have two options, but on top of that they also have wide distributors now, with Damien Dialende having improved his skill sets immeasurably under Tony Brown. It is not uncommon now to see Damien Dialende operating as pullback off that 4-pod, or even a little bit wider, being able to link up with the 15 or 10 as a first receiver, unlocking the wide men and therefore creating width. This is the key perk of these distribution skills, in that it allows increased width in the Springbok attack. Now here we have a 2-4-2 shape off 10. Now I really want you to focus on the playmakers here and the 2-pod. As you can see, the 2-pod starts to split as the ball goes wide. Each playmaker thereby has a forward assigned to him, with the increasing width by Khaleesi allowing width to happen on the attack, meaning that if they get wide, they have ball security against counter-ruck. Now Pollard operating at first receiver rather than behind the 4-pod allows for this increased width when combining with 12 and 15. However, the forward allocation is incredibly important to decide where the strike zone will be. As we can see here, this is the 2-4-1-1, and we can see Pieter-Steph du Toit in the wide channels with his arm out, asking for the ball. His location here means that the wide attack is an option as the ball will be secured. We saw the same principle in the earlier example against Argentina. As we can see here, we have the 2-4-1-1 with the 10-15 set up, and we know that the missile carry is going to happen here. Lebox overs line and dummy opens the 13 channel for playmaker turn penetrator Fassi, who links up with Colby, but Colby has Khaleesi here just in case he isn't able to get to the try line, meaning ruck security is ensured. They are also able to strike this area via kick, with players like Sasha Feinberg Umangazulu. Feinberg Umangazulu is such a skilled, multifaceted player, and as such we see him being able to kick through as well as make these passes that lead to opportunities that really wouldn't be there if you don't have these full level of skill sets. Now considering this, we need to go back to the Australia game and that 1-1 set in the midfield. Now as we know, 10 has two options while 15 also has two options. Now we must consider ruck security for the next phase, because if Willie le Roux picks the wide option in Damien Dialende, he's going away from his forward support. As such, we know that the strike zones are going to be most likely any one of these two channels with the forwards being used. This is the key logic behind the 1-4-2-1. By having a forward out wide, you're able to actually hit that zone. Now, going back to that midfield 1-1 split, we can see how this operates with the missile carry. Now we know that Willie le Roux is going to attempt to commit Harry Wilson, seen here. Now he's going to do this to try and open the 13 channel for the missile carry in Eben Etzebeth, who's going to be striking here. However, whilst we can see this play out, the catch-up from the inside of Wilson is effective. This means Wilson is able to drift out, making it harder for Willie le Roux to commit him and open the 13 channel. Now the pass does go to Eben Etzebeth, who does make considerable gain line against weak shoulders, but Wilson being able to catch up means it wasn't effective as it could have been. Now the use of this tactic is the perfect merging of the Kiwi and South African philosophies. You see, South Africa want to use this physical first line of attack, but they also want to be able to strike wide even though they don't seem able to. You see, Willie le Roux has two options here. One, the first line or his missile carry, and two, the slice option in Damien Dialende. Now he actually went for Eben Etzebeth here because he wants that physicality. The physicality offered by attackers like Eben Etzebeth. The perks of this are that you crash up on weak shoulders, you can create space via the late pass, and also you can set for next phase via lightning quick ball pretty effectively. You see, the danger of passing to the wide option in Damien Dialende too early is that this automatically activates the drift in the defensive line because they don't have to worry about the guys in front of the ball carrier. The way to get around this is by creating a skilled first line option who can pass late. Now this is something that Eddie Jones introduced to England and was starting to come to fruition in 2022. The pass goes to the free pod who pull back to Smith. Now Smith has two options here. One, he can hit his hard runner in Tom Curry, who will go up the guts and smash up. This in turn will create a ruck, giving New Zealand the opportunity to slow the ball down and fold men over. The second option is the slice option in Owen Farrell here, but if they give this too early, that means the defence are simply going to drift off and catch them. Therefore, they go for option C. The ball goes to Tom Curry, who checks his run, attracting defenders before passing right to Owen Farrell on a flat pass. This means that more defenders have been held and more space has been saved for the wide men. Now the Springboks under Tony Brown have added this to their game. Tony Brown has introduced this because 1, he has carriers like Eben Etzebeth who can completely smash down defences and therefore are going to attract a lot of defenders, and 2, he's developed the skill sets by which they're able to make these passes and make decisions that put players into gaps. Now South Africa's best example or use of this was with their 2-4-2 shape, one of the options that they've used against Australia. Now the 2-4-2 attack shape is the Kiwiest of Kiwi shapes that you can imagine. Popularised by the Crusaders, it involves a 4-pod in the centre of the field, combined by 2 sets of 2 forwards on the edges, players who are able to run, pass and clean out effectively. Now Tony Brown's employment of this shape is all about identifying space. Now against Australia, we see a really good example of this in use. Khaleesi and Pieter-Steph du Toit truck up the 15 metres and set in the 2-pod. Now in off-10 shape, Feinberg Umangazulu passes to Low, who pulls back to Jesse Creel, who spots space. Now, Creel spots that the best option was probably Malherbe here, who has a missile option off Low as through. As such, Creel attacks the same space using his detached peel forward in Oxenche, highlighted in orange, as a late missile option. By using Unche as a missile option, this in turn will draw any outside wider defenders in to plug these holes. This means by using this first line option, the defence is forced to jam in and not drift. Jesse Creel commits his outside men and passes to his first line in Unche. Unche is then assisted by Damien Diolende, who changes from playmaker to penetrator, offering himself as a missile option. He runs into the 13 channel, drawing the last man and releasing Marks as the next missile option. This results in a massive break up the right wing, and it's obvious that this is beautiful catch and pass with great first line use, but so much of it comes down to Tony Brown's development of the skill sets of his Springbok players. Players like Damien Diolende and Jesse Blue Steel Creel, these sensational players have enhanced their game, becoming playmakers and accurate distributors who can take charge of an attack, in addition to the 10-15. Knowing exactly how to target for maximum effect, knowing when you have to change from a playmaker to a penetrator role to assist the attack, all these things scream of adaptability and skill sets to find the space. Now, hopefully we've shown how Tony Brown's 1-4-2-1 shape develops and creates space with the skill sets of the players involved in it. However, we should also know that space comes first. Regardless of the shape, space comes first. The freedom and license that Tony Brown has given his charges is absolutely magnificent. After regathering a kick, the Springboks moved the ball wide immediately and set into their 1-4-2-1 shape. However, there's a problem. The previous phase has essentially absorbed all of the backs. There is only one playmaker in Feinberg Umagazulu behind the 4-pod and no one outside him. Handré Pollard, highlighted in yellow here, should be in position behind the 2-pod ready to operate as second receiver, thereby providing full width to the attack. Now, he's not, so we should expect to see a truck up or a missile carry from the 4-pod. However, we don't. Feinberg Umangazulu takes the pullback, setting the 2-1 pods as a missile carry catch and pass line, with each man attempting to commit his outside defender before passing to his missile option. This allows Van Staden to get to the outside, aiming to commit the last backfield defender before passing to his wing. However, he does get caught and this doesn't transpire. But as we can see here, he makes a great carry and he's supported by Etzebeth, forming a 2-4-1-1 on the next phase. Now Pieter-Steph du Toit on the wing here wants the ball. Now we can see Jesse Creel here going, yep, that's the right option, but there's no 10-15 axis, meaning Handré Pollard has to move into position behind the 4-pod in order to make this work. Now this is where the space first philosophy really shines. There is no passing option to get wide, but it's Handré Pollard and there is a DA or a cross kick option. That is what happens. The Springboks don't give the opportunity for Australia to cover this space. They put in the DA and Pieter-Steph du Toit takes it on the run. He's tackled by Koroibete, but he offloads to Jesse Creel, who if he didn't knock it on, it's a guaranteed try. This shows the beauty, the true beauty of this new way. There is a shape involved. However, the shape exists to serve space, not the other way round. Off a restart return, the Springboks hit up the midfield and then spin it wide. Eventually they get wide and they set up their 2-4-2 1-1 shape with the playmakers already set in position. Now, because they ran a pick and go, Khaleesi and Pieter-Steph du Toit were both needed to secure and resource this wide ruck. Now, once they get it, the pass goes to Oxenjay, who pulls back to Feinberg Umangazulu. Now, Umangazulu has his two options. One, his missile carry, and two, his 15 or slice option. Now, if he goes for the 15, he's likely to be caught by the adjusting defender from the Wallabies, who are now conditioned to push up. Now, neither of these options has a great chance, so he takes the option that no one else sees. A beautiful M1 pass over the top to Kurtley Arendse in acres of space. Kurtley Arendse then does what Kurtley Arendse does best and wreaks absolute havoc. However, he's made so much ground that he needs support, and yet the shape provides, with a forward here ready to assist him. It's all about playing to space and then letting the structure or the shape take care of you in those situations. Now, Tony Brown has clearly done a hell of a job, but there are so many little things that contribute to the success of this attack. Everything from that footwork to the overs lines to the missile carry options to scooting and to the Elling in, as we're going to show you in a little bit. So this is something that we're going to actually talk you through and show and break down a little bit more of the detail involved in this Springboks attack. Now, this is something that we term the critical non-essentials, or those unseen things, the 1%ers that all add up. Now, under Rassie and Jacques, particularly in the first years and in defence, the Springboks were very competent in the areas of the dark arts. Now, this has now been transpired and extrapolated to attack. In this video, taken from the France versus South Africa sneak peek, which never transpired for the full video, I do apologise, but we talk about Elling in, a principle designed to compromise fringe defence, which when combined with scooting can lead to very devastating results for the defending team. The Springboks have scored quite a few tries over the Rugby Championship 24 using these principles. Now, this has been brought in combination with the Nines development, with these players expected to develop their off-9 attack to new levels. Now, one area they're looking to develop is their scooting ability, being able to take the ball from the base of the ruck and pass to multiple carriers coming in on hard angles, being able to have good pass selection, be able to go themselves, being able to set multiple carriers up against weak shoulders. Now in 2024, this has been very efficient, with multiple carries making huge gain lines with these dynamics. However, another way of making this efficient is corrupting the fold. We see this principle off set piece, where after a strike up the 10 channel, Lukhanyo Am goes into the defensive line to impact the fold of Nick Frost, who is trying to get round but is unable to. Am is trying to bide time, keeping the open side fringe short so that when the 9 scoots and sends the hooker up, it makes a much bigger gain line. Now this logic at the try line has proved absolutely devastating. Pieter-Steph du Toit takes the pass off 9 and uses footwork to target its outside defender, drawing in Kane and Leonard Brown. Cock clears out and gets quick ball, which ensures, using outside footwork, another carrier attracting Finau. Finau is then roped in by Diolande's Elling in. Kane here touches him to get him to follow him out, but he can't because he's been roped in. This opens the D1 gap where Finau should be, which means Grant Williams takes it straight over and scores a pretty easy try. Against Australia, we see exactly the same logic, with Van Staden and Dixon Elling in to drag Valentini away from folding around the ruck. This opens the channel outside D1 for Smith, who goes straight over. From the end-on angle, we can see this in a lot more clarity. Van Staden's Elling in prevents 2 players folding over, which in turn leads to the open side fringe undermanned, which is why this try is scored. Now, I know we've gone deep today. We've talked a lot about attack shapes, how forwards are positioned on the field, what the design is, so on and so forth. However, one thing we really do need to talk about besides the attack is how the defence must react to a changing attack. See, we must understand if we're running the ball out from everywhere and we're playing with a lot more freedom and a lot less conservatively, as shown by the use of the first line and the offload here, the defence inherently needs to become much more adaptable and much more proactive to transition scenarios because they will crop up with this attack. Now, Jacques Nienaber didn't have to worry about this as much because the Springboks never played as expansively, whereas now Rassie has to consider this, and it's why he's brought in Jerry Flannery, who we're going to now go into and show what the defence is now doing to react to these scenarios. Now, the Springboks have won their last 2 World Cups based predominantly on their defence and their set piece. Therefore, these are things that you do not want to change. Adapt them, yes, but you are not going to change them. Jerry Flannery's role is to adapt the defence to the changes occurring in the attack. The attack is now infinitely more dangerous to the opposition, but it's also potentially dangerous to the Springboks. You get a knock-on here, and suddenly it goes from all very sexy to oh shit, squeaky bum time. As such, they need to know exactly what to do when these situations occur. Now structurally, it should be noted that not much has actually changed, especially off set piece and the general principles. Frans Malherbe, Quagga Smith, Jasper Wiese, they're all incredibly important to the way that the Springboks still defend. Now this is not to say that there haven't been tweaks, namely inspired by the 2021 series against Australia in the Rugby Championship, because this did have a little bit of an impact. Now if we flash back to 2019, we can see the same dynamics still in play. Off a 7-man line-out, we see a crash up the 10 channel and South Africa fold around their 4, with Marks joining in after not contesting. The tight head prop fills in on the short side. Now one more phase off 9 occupies Vermeulen, but Koch notices the Welsh 10-15 preparing the 21 pattern and pointing it out. Because of this warning, the rewind defensive side are ready, with Damien Diolende catching up to snuff it out. 5 years later, we see very similar defensive principles in action against Argentina. Off a 6+1 line-out, the Argentinians run a 21 pattern, with the first phase of Chocobares trucking up the 10 channel. However, on the second phase, we have a short option from 9, and we can see Frans Malherbe, the tight head prop, in his position on the near side. Now he sees the 10's late swing, meaning he knows the 21 pattern's on, and he pushes the defensive line out, which leads to the attack being well handled by the out-to-win blitz of the Springboks. Now, if we fast forward this phase play a little bit, there's something I want to show you a couple of phases down the line. So here, Jesse Kriel as the adjusting defender in his out-to-win blitz pushes the attacker back towards his jackals. Peter Steph du Toit gets over the ruck and steals the ball. This, in turn, allows them to launch their own transition attack. This defensive principle is something we've talked about many times before as the Adge delivery system. In many prior videos of mine, I've discussed the adjusting defender and how their out-to-win blitz allows them to make side-on hits, therefore driving the carrier back towards their jackals. This is all about driving the attack back and in, getting turnovers or at the very least, generating slow ball. Now all these examples were pre-2019, but 5 years later, it's still a danger and it's still being used, proving just as effective as it once was. Now, structurally we can tell that not much has actually changed, but as we know, Flannery's remit was not to change the defence, but to make it more adaptable. And this is exactly what he's done. Playing like this means a team has to be able to flip from attack to defence effectively at any point on the field to limit the damage of those first couple of seconds in particular. And as such, we have to show what damn Jerry is introducing to make this defence more adaptable. We start with Caleb Clark's try and the run of play in the Springboks' first test against New Zealand in 2024. Now, as per their principles, the Springboks were slow to react here. The Springboks work short side and Dixon tries to pop the pass, which is knocked on. Cody Taylor picks up the ball and with brilliant footwork beats the first man in Malherbe and sets the ruck. Perenara gets the ball to the late entry in Mackenzie, who gets the ball to Lomax, who then passes to Barrett, and it just goes down the line and they score a try. However, what was going on behind this is really evident as to why this try was scored. Now, Flannery would not have been happy with this transition defence. The principles behind his transition defence, so as far as I can tell, are to connect in freeze ASAP, to catch up from the inside, and to spread to allow the adjusting defender blitz. Now, from way long ago earlier on in this video, you may remember the Phil Larder iron curtain and the freeze process that you saw here, or connecting in freeze, defending zonally in these mini units. Off transition defence, getting into these mini units and surrounding the ball carrier is absolutely key and the first priority. Here, Taylor picks up the ball and we can see automatically the mini unit forming. Feinberg, Umangazulu, Malherbe and Oxenche all converge to each other to support each other around this contact area. Here, they're just trying to limit the damage by covering all of his options, be it footwork or short pot passes, the list goes on. Now another thing to note is Mackenzie's position in the backfield here and how he approaches the line, with Savea seen in red here. Now whilst Taylor beats Malherbe, the mini unit do their job, bringing him down and snuffing out the initial threat. However, no one really folds over from the Springbok blindside, and this is a problem. Umbanambi is at catch-up and Kriel's lined up Savea as his first man, missing D-Mac's late entry due to ball watching. As such, D-Mac gets through and no one can get to him in time, passing down the line to score a very good try. So this was a bit of a breakdown of the process of what Flannery wants in his transition defence. The things that caused this try were little folding from the blind, open side fringe organisation and ball watching defence. You see, Kriel blitzes as the adjusting defender, but he hasn't seen Mackenzie's late entry because of ball watching. Mackenzie has time to work due to the slow catch-up and lack of fold from the blind, which means that it's simply a numbers game, and by a simple catch and pass, something that never really works on the Springboks, the All Blacks are allowed to score a try. Now this happened because the Springboks only managed to do really one of the things on their to-do list. In an example against Wales, the process was followed a lot more accurately and with a lot more urgency in one particular moment. Taking the pullback from the forepod, Hendrickse uses the peel forward to try and isolate the seam, but knocks on. The free forms and immediately spreads, giving confidence to the adjusting defender to blitz, which in turn leads to what would be a penalty if it hadn't been a knock-on. It is all about working in frees and getting connected until the immediate danger is passed. In this example, Argentina force a jackal turnover 1 and the ball is moved wide. Now really have a look at how this operates. You can see how the frees form and follow the ball carrier down the line. If the ball carrier uses footwork and moves laterally, the mini unit changes, coincidentally following very similar principles to the Phil Larder Iron Curtain. This was a key consideration that had to be taken into account by Rassi, which is why when he hired Tony Brown, he knew the defence must react well to perceived turnovers and changes that will occur from this attack. The second the turnover happens, the free must combine and be on the attacker before he even knows what's happening, so he's pressured and he can't make any good decisions that lead to a good counter-attack. In this case, the pressure is so severe that the All Blacks actually concede a penalty out of desperation to get going. The principle of combining frees as well as joining frees is absolutely critical to the Springboks. In this case, the kick is pressured and as such the ball doesn't go out. As such, we start to see Ireland move the ball in field and we see the free start to combine, highlighted in red. Osborne takes the ball into the midfield, a key point for the launch of Irish kick return plays. However, he is taken by Oxenche, with Snyman and Khaleesi there in support. Snyman's support is needed. LQB is achieved, after which we see 2 mini units forming. One, highlighted in yellow, is the Blitz mini unit, who apply pressure, whilst the red mini unit fold behind to make sure if the break happens, it's covered. We see the same principle against New Zealand, where we can see all 3 elements covered, not just one. New Zealand send a high kick up and get absolutely smashed, after which the counter-ruck goes through and New Zealand turn the ball over in a prime position. The ball is passed wide and the mini units instantly form, with the red unit following the ball and spreading to join up with the yellow blitzing unit. The catch-up of the red unit gives confidence to the blitz unit to do their thing, and as such, by the time DMAC passes the ball, it looks like a South African normal defensive line. Now this is still in its infancy, because the Springboks are still developing their attack principles. However, Rassi, being the brilliant coach that he is, understands that in order to develop this attack to be where you want it to be, your defence is going to have to change as well. This drive being driven by their work rate and their want to achieve great things for South Africa. They've already shown their World Cup pedigree, connecting their fans with the team even more, but next up is going a step beyond to get consistency across all of their performances. The clear next step for this team is their attempt to supplant the greatest team of all time, the 2015 All Blacks. Have they achieved this yet? No, they haven't, but they have the potential to. This is half down to the players and coaching staff that they have, but the other half is down to how badly they want it for South Africa. I am a proud Englishman, and always will be, but watching Chasing the Sun too, it's hard not to respect and admire the bond between the rugby team and South Africa. This evolution, this development, this want to become the greatest team of all time, it's all driven by their obligation to inspire their country. On a human level, the acceptance of that responsibility is absolutely beautiful. And why going forward? I can't wait to see how far they go.
I would like people to know that it's definitely not for accolades and things that we're doing this. The feeling of when you see people smiling, because we're working together, we're believing in something, the same thing. We can align, we can mind each other, we can care about each other. For me, that pretty much makes my heart pretty warm.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that. That was It's a pretty safe to say a fair assessment. It's 1 hour 9 minutes. It's one of my longest videos. Originally cut down from 1 hour 40, as it was last week. There's a lot of deliberation about what to remove and what kind of details to include. And, we got about 60 to 70%, I think, in there, maybe 60-ish, of the detail. But yeah, 1 hour 40 is just ridiculous. So, if you're watching this and you're still here, I'm considering 1 hour 9 an absolute win. But yeah, please do like, comment, subscribe, share, all that kind of jazz. Really drives the channel, really boosts the algorithm, and hopefully gets more people talking about Springboks and engaged in healthier, you know, more analytical rugby debate, which is basically what this whole channel is, you know, made to do. Yeah, so this took about 4 weeks approximately, you know, to get going. So, you know, one thing I do want to say is that there's a lot of research and a lot of study has gone into it. However, you know, one thing to say is that, as with all my videos, is that this is always my interpretation of what's going on. I'm not a fly on the wall. I don't have an in to all the international rugby teams in the world, like especially South Africa. So, you know, I just want to put that out there. This is my interpretation, so I could be completely wrong. Hopefully I'm not. You know, I think most people watching going, okay, you've got quite a few points right there. But I just want to, you know, keep that in mind. It's my interpretation. Yeah, and also, so yeah, the first thing I want to say is that this content is, you know, the reason I started this channel is to promote healthy rugby debate. It will never go behind a paywall. It will always be free. It will always be there to enjoy for anyone. However, simultaneously, after turning up to Halloween 3 hours late because I got stuck on the video and my friends were like, what the fuck? I have been convinced to open a buy me a coffee, which I'll bung in the link. You know, like I say, you know, if you've actually enjoyed it and you want to buy me a beer, buy me a coffee seems like false advertising, if I'm being honest. I'm not going to say no. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, guys. Until next time, yeah, go well.